Recognize the ranking member if he is ready for his opening remarks.
Mr. Chairman,
I should say the ranking member Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there are a couple of bills on today's agenda that I've got some real concerns about. But before getting into that, please accept my thanks for hearing Representative Obernolte and Stewart's bills that will create economic growth potential in Utah and California by removing revisionary interest and releasing future use potential of some unutilized federal land. And your willingness to hear these bills is recognized and duly appreciated. As of yesterday, according to the National Interagency Fire Center, more than 3.24 million acres have burned this year. This puts us on track to outpace the total single-season acreage average burned every year over the past decade. A significant contributor to this statistic is the Hermit's Peak fire, which is still actively burning in New Mexico. This fire, started in the Pecos Wilderness area, has burned 341,000 acres so far, and we've spent more than $251 million so far in taxpayer money with 3,000 wildland firefighters protecting nearby communities and their surrounding environment. Despite their efforts, more than 900 structures have burned, and the fire is still only 72% contained. So why do I bring this up? Because today we are considering legislation to add new wilderness in New Mexico, less than 100 miles from where the Hermit's Peak fire started. Since there is a well-documented correlation between heightened wildfire risk within vast regions of designated wilderness, this proposed legislation once again inserts the minority party as the environmental defender of federal lands, this time in New Mexico. Whether blinded by idealistic ideology of how things they'd like it to be, or perhaps the smoke from the Hermit's Peak fire, the legislative sponsors of this bill cannot see the reality. More wilderness means more wildfire. H.R. 2522 would force the United States Forest Service to roll an incremental 13,000 acres into their management portfolio at a time when the only thing more overwhelming than their management burden is an apparent lack of trust the locals have for them. Doubling down on wilderness area while New Mexico is burning due to the fire that started in the wilderness is, well, it's just perplexing. According to the Forest Service, the Hermit's Peak fire started as a prescribed burn but went out of control due to heavy winds and a significant amount of dead and down fuels in the understory. This further validates that failing to mechanically thin overgrown forests before igniting a prescribed burn is a recipe for disaster. But don't take my word for this. Take the word of the people who live in the district, who are trying to pick up the pieces of their lives as a function of Hermit's Peak and are pictured on the posters behind me. These locals described the fire as, quote, Armageddon. They said that if given the chance, they would have practiced more sustainable forest thinning in partnership with the Forest Service, thereby lessening the impacts of catastrophic fire. However, because of government red tape, they were prevented from treating the lands in their own backyards, allowing this devastating fire that could be replicated if H.R. 2522 becomes law. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit an article into the record from the publication Searchlight New Mexico that conveys voices from this community.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will close my comments by reading just an excerpt from this article. The air smells of ash and the landscape is leached of color. Spots of green punctuate the valley floor in places, but along the ridges, the powdery residue of the charred trees has fallen like snow, accumulating up to 4 inches deep. These are slices of the forest where the fire burned the hottest, scorching ponderosa pines from crown to root. Once titans, they're now matchsticks. Polo Lopez gestures in their direction southward towards Hermit Peak. Before a tsunami of flames ripped through this canyon in Tierra Monte, the canopy was so thick that it was impossible to see the nearby mountain. But 2 prescribed burns set by the U.S. Forest Service, one on Hermit's Peak, the other on Calf Canyon to the southwest, have changed all that. When the blazes merged to form the biggest wildfire in state history, flames engulfed nearly 160 acres of riparian forest that once belonged to her father. It wiped us out, Lopez says. Like so many in the devastation zone, she squarely places the blame on the United States Forest Service, not only for starting a prescribed burn in the windy month of April when gusts reached 70 miles per hour, but for a century of conflict with rural communities. If we want to stop the wildfire crisis, bills like H.R. 2522 and also 7509 that's on the docket today. They're not the solution. They're the problem. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair